Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. At AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL. Good Wednesday morning to you, Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson.
Hey.
You. Pleased to have Steve Hayes on the line from the Weekly Standard. You see him on Brett Baer's special report panel from time to time. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Morning, guys. How's it going?
I know that you are a huge Green Bay Packer fan, and I know you're from Wisconsin, and obviously huge controversy in this country. There are a lot of more important things to get to, and we will get to that. But I wanted to get your take on what happened Monday night in that game.
Well, there had been so many bad calls throughout the course of the game that the Seahawks got that ball for the last drive, and I immediately texted my brother and said, a bad call is going to decide this game. So, in a way, I was ready for it, and so when it happened, it wasn't sort of that, there were no shoes thrown at the TV.
Right.
None of that.
But it would be understandable if you did. Well, let me ask you this, though, because Wisconsin was the big center of the big union battle. And Republicans have said there's a big difference between public sector unions and private sector unions. But I look at what the NFL wants out of these refs, which is they want to get rid of the pension plan, which if I were the CEO of any company, I would want to get rid of pension plans as well. They want to hire more refs to make them more accountable, which seems to be understandable, and they don't want them to have that big of a raise. So, where do you come down on who's right, who's wrong on this particular issue? Because it seems to be everybody siding with the refs these days. Yeah,
I think there's, as is often the case, I think both sides are right. Both sides are making good arguments. I mean, if you look at the officials' salaries, they're making a lot of money for what is in effect a part-time job. Now, I think the bigger picture, the debate we should be having, or the debate the NFL should be having, is part-time refs versus full-time refs. Make them full-time refs, give them benefits. It's not, given how much money the NFL generates in revenue, I would say putting the integrity of the game at the center of your concerns ought to be the way that the NFL is thinking about this, and at this point they're just not. It is true, as Aaron Rodgers said yesterday in his interview, it is true that the NFL is just putting its financial concerns ahead of the integrity of the game. And I think the longer-term worry is if you see, an erosion of the support for the NFL because of the way it's handling these things, and the fact that the NFL came out yesterday and offered words of support for the calls that nobody in the country thought was right, I think really does damage to the credibility, and you can see this thing snowballing if they don't get ahead of it.
All right, moving on to other issues, because there's stuff going on in the world beyond the NFL. The Libyan president said yesterday that the film was not behind the consulate attack. Yet, if you listen to the president of the United States and many members of the administration, they tend to leave the lingering idea that indeed it was about the film. What do you think?
Yeah, they're basically saying that directly. It was fascinating to listen to President Obama yesterday at the United Nations, where he had, 3 full paragraphs of his speech as a discussion basically of the film. And, he had, I think belatedly, a defense at least of free speech. But he's talking about the film. He's putting it front and center. And it's been the centerpiece of the Obama administration's public relations campaign for the past 2 weeks. The problem with that, in my view, is that the best way to handle the film was to marginalize it from the beginning so that it didn't get the kind of attention that it ultimately received, and there's nobody more responsible for giving it that attention than the president himself.
Right, and then he goes, and when he talks about it, it brings even more attention to the film that, by the way, nobody in America has seen, and I doubt few people in the Muslim world have seen.
Right, that's exactly right. And the president seems to get this, at least at times. And he did this interview with The View that aired yesterday. The interview was the day before. And he himself said the best way to marginalize, this kind of speech is to ignore it entirely. Well, he said that. The interview then aired, and then he spent, several minutes at the United Nations talking about it, which I just think was unwise in the extreme.
Why do you think he hasn't spoken with world leaders who are in town for the UN gathering? And why especially does he not want to talk face-to-face with Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, there was an answer actually provided by an Obama administration official yesterday in the New York Times, and it was actually not an administration official, but a campaign official who told the New York Times, look, the president has campaigning to do, and if he meets with one of these world leaders, he's got to meet with 10. And it was the kind of thing you have to read it twice. You Did somebody
Did I read
really
that right?
say that? That was incredible. And it was the case, when news first broke a couple weeks ago that he had refused this request for a meeting with Netanyahu. It was the case that you had Obama administration officials backgrounding reporters saying, look, this is crunch time in the election. We just don't have the time to do this. And again, you stop and think about that. And, here you've got one of our closest allies in the world, not just in the region. You've got one of our closest allies potentially on the verge of a war, having to make a decision about whether to launch this kind of preemptive strike to take out Iran's nuclear program or parts of it. And the president won't meet with them because of what the president's own aides say were political concerns. It really is a sort of a striking contrast that, in a different media environment might be getting some attention.
All right, let's take a look at the polls. And when you look at the polls, you see that it's beginning to look like it's a more difficult electoral college challenge for Mitt Romney, especially in the key swing states. That some people have suggested, Charlie Cook among them, that the race seems to be swinging toward, look, still very early, a lot of things still to happen, but right now it looks like it's starting to swing in the direction of Barack Obama.
Yeah, well, look, I think that's right. I mean, you hear a lot of carping from Republicans that the polls are oversampling Democrats and they're not to be trusted, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's basically true on its face. Polls are oversampling Democrats. I mean, in the polls that came out today, New York Times poll, CBS New York Times polls that show Barack Obama with huge advantages in Ohio and Florida in particular, are oversampling Democrats. It's like a Democrat +9 sample. So there's no question that I think Democrats are being oversampled in many of these polls that are put out by mainstream media organizations. Having said that, I also think there's no question that the lead right now is with President Obama, and that he's got pretty significant momentum if you look at the way that the voters have swung in the past 3 weeks.
He is starting to also gain some traction on Romney when it comes to handling the economy. I don't understand why that is, because it doesn't seem things have gotten a whole lot better, and the long-term solutions don't seem to be there at all, obviously.
Well, it's interesting. If you talk to Republican pollsters, they will tell you privately that this is a Clinton bounce, and that having Bill Clinton at the convention, not just the speech, which was seen by some 20 million Americans, but the coverage of the speech, the fact that Bill Clinton, who people remember for at least helping create boom end to the 1990s, was getting Barack Obama's back on this, actually matters to voters a lot more than I thought it would. I mean, I didn't think that the Clinton speech was that great. I didn't think he'd be that persuasive as a sort of character witness, but Republican pollsters have been telling me that, so I think it's not insignificant.
All right, Steve, great to have you on. I hope your Packers get a fair shake this weekend, okay?
Yeah, just a win. We'll take it.